Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being at our City Council meeting tonight. If you'd please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record tonight, Mayor Wagner is out of town, as well as Council Member Brent Sandstrom and Patsy in Finance. And first on the agenda tonight, we have the consent calendar, agenda items A through D. Would someone like to make a motion to accept consent calendar tonight?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion to accept consent calendar items A through D.
Seconded.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Limley to approve consent calendar items A through D, and seconded by Councilmember.
Actually, it was Julia.
Councilmember Julia. Do we? Let's take a vote on that.
I'm just louder.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 6-0. Oh. No, that's 6, because I gave up. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a special presentation tonight. Mr. Tony Latham with Family Promise of Skagit Valley. Thank you, Tony, for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Mayor and councilmen and councilwomen. I appreciate the time to be able to come up and present about Family Promise. For many of you, this is my first time up here, and hopefully you may have heard of us or may not have heard of us. Family Promise is actually one of 3 emergency shelters. We do have some other domestic violence and children's shelters and teen shelters, but we're a family shelter. We're actually located, our day center is located here in Sedro-Woolley, and we just celebrated a year. And so if you haven't heard of us, we like that in terms of the fact that we haven't, hopefully we haven't seen the police there, and we've seen the fire only once or twice, but we've really tried to keep a low profile. You've probably read a lot of the articles about homelessness right now, whether it's in our cities or down south or throughout the nation. But Family Promise is an affiliate. We're 199 of 199 affiliates nationwide. What we do is we're an emergency shelter that uses churches to house families at night. So we're kind of a different model. We're a county-wide model. We have 23 churches that are a part of our network, and we use those churches, some of those as support churches, some of those as host churches. And those churches provide shelter, they provide food, they provide the volunteers to house families throughout the year. We're a shelter that's 365 days, 24 hours a day, and so we provide that for families that from the Skagit Valley area and those that have come into our area and migrated in. And so it's an amazing concept. We have our day center here at Bethlehem Lutheran, and so at that shelter or at the day center, we have Wi-Fi, we have case management, we have people that work with these homeless families to get back up on their feet. So we work with them to get jobs, and then we work with them to get housing. As many of you know, the housing is the biggest piece of this. From the summit, housing summit back in January, you may know that we're in need of 3,700 units of housing. Over 16,000 families are in a precariously housed situation. Here in Sedro-Woolley, there's over 150 kids labeled under the McKinley-Vento Act as homeless, and so it's a real problem throughout the county. We've put ourselves here as we really wanted a family-friendly place. We believe Sedro-Woolley is a family-friendly spot that we can have our families at and not feel like they're at risk. The families that we take on, we work with Community Action, and those families oftentimes are not high-needs families. They are homeless, but may or may not have many of the issues that some of the other families or individuals have, and so they may not be top on the list at Community Action or somewhere else. And so we work with a lot of families that just may be homeless or just have one or two issues, and so they may not be high on the priorities list. But our program really has been successful since we've been open just over a year. We've had 12 families graduate our program. We take 4 families at a time and work with them. And so those families are housed throughout the county, some here in Sedro-Woolley and some up in Concrete and Mount Vernon, wherever we can find places. And so this has been a great program. We look to expand in the future. Oftentimes, Family Promise affiliates grow in terms of starting into the housing arena and trying to combat that. I'm on many committees that are looking at ways to fix the homeless issue. So that's really what we're about, is trying to fix the homeless issue, put ourselves out of business as we would like to do, and hopefully be able to contribute to your city here in Sedro-Woolley. Before you've got you have 3 pieces of literature. You have our brochure that just kind of specifically talks about ours. You have from the Public Health Department, you've got their literature on the numbers of individuals. There's 3,600, as I talked about, units that are needed in that Skagit County. That translates into 9,600 people that are in need of housing. So we're talking about literally the equivalent of a city. And so that to me is something that I don't find acceptable, but hopefully we as a county and the cities together can work together to fix this homeless issue. And that is really, do you have any questions of us? Hopefully we've kept a low profile to try to make it a great partnership here with the city.
So I'd just like to say, when they first came to the city, we struggled a little bit with how to kind of fit them in to zoning and different code issues, and I really appreciated Tony's work with us. We got everything sorted out, did what we need to do to get them in, and I have received 0 complaints, literally. So from my view, that's an exceptionally well-run operation to have not a single issue from a neighbor rise to my attention here at the city. So I really appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's greatly appreciated. I know there's such a huge need, and it's just not so difficult to meet it. So difficult to meet it.
And
it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mayor.
You said 9,600 in need. Is that like statewide? I missed that.
That's just countywide. When they're talking about needing 3,700 units of housing, that's the equivalent of 2.67 per household, and that's 9,600 people that are in need of housing. And so it's a major challenge when you're talking about trying to build that amount of housing, as well as just find that. Right now, the vacancy rate right now is less than 1%. So what we're facing is hundreds of people applying for an apartment, and obviously a homeless family is not going to be on the top of most people's lists to rent to, and so it's very challenging for our homeless families to get back up on their feet, and that's something that we're fighting for and trying to work and build relationships with landlords and work to support those individuals so that they are successful. We work with those individuals over up to 2 years to try to ensure that those case management happens, that those families are successful in those apartments, and that, again, they're great members of society for your cities.
So when you said case management, you also help them with maybe resumes and things like that? I mean, like job search and...
We do those services, as well as we refer to other agencies that do that as well. We're more than capable on job searching and resume building and working to apply for apartments, but we do use other agencies when it, vocational rehab and WorkSource and those agencies to really add to what we've been able to do. We work closely with the Helping Hands Food Bank and other agencies, Habitat for Humanity, to try to build that network for families.
I'm just curious, is there any support for the family? Because I know every time you apply for a place, there's a fee that's involved, and it's a non-refundable fee. So, given that it's less than 1%, that means people are putting out a lot of money just to apply for different places. Are there resources or places where people can go to get support for that, to help with that?
We're currently exploring a partnership with another nonprofit agency that might be able to provide a matching grant for funds like that, and we're working to develop a fund, at least for our families, and working with Community Action. Community Action does have some funds available, but it's a challenge to meet the need. There's over 250 families and individuals on that list at Community Action that are working through the case management cycle and trying to have access to those funds. So it's a challenge. It's a lot of funds that are needed.
And just out of curiosity, do you have an idea or percentage of how many of those people who are trying to get into housing are actually from Sedro-Woolley?
I don't currently have those numbers, but that is something I will look into. We have a wide range of. One of our first families that applied was actually a Sedro-Woolley family, and the child was in high school and was a star athlete on the football team, and it was interesting to see that homelessness has no bounds in terms of, we've had people with PhDs, we've had people with no education, and so it's quite an interesting place to be in this county with the lack of housing. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for coming tonight.
I wouldn't mind volunteering.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have public comment time. We'll ask you to come up, state your name and your address. We're limiting testimony to 3 minutes, please. And we're going to enforce that at 3 minutes. This is your opportunity to provide testimony on the record and not the time to debate or question individual members of the council.
Good evening. My name is Mary Anderson, and I live at 928 Beachley Road in Sedro-Woolley. I was unable to be here at the last City Council meeting, and I'm very concerned about what went on. As a member of a democratically elected church organization for 35 years, I'm quite familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, and it seems to me they were overthrown at the last City Council meeting. First of all, the library resolution was presented as second reading, old business, when I and many others were not aware that there was a first reading of this resolution. Since I and many of my fellow Sedro-Woolleyans have been attending City Council meetings regularly, and without exception since January 21st, 2016, the suggestion that this resolution was a second reading seems unfounded in fact. Secondly, under Robert's Rules of Order, a person conducting a meeting as president, chairperson, or mayor must step down as moderator and give the gavel, as it were, to the acting moderator if the president, chairperson, or mayor wishes to speak on an issue or motion before the assembly. It is not okay for a presiding officer to express an opinion on a motion, particularly when an issue is a hot-button one, or, to quote Robert's Rules of Order, if the chairman, mayor, has even the appearance of being a partisan, he loses much of his ability to control those who are on the opposite side of the question. That's page 241. Third, the wording of this resolution does not allow for the public comment to change the recommendation to be put forth by the negotiating team. Therefore, the so-called public forum upcoming on July 25th, 2016, will apparently merely be lip service to the many concerned citizens who don't actually want to give their library away. I applaud Council members Brenda Kinzer and Chuck Owen for acknowledging that negotiations should recognize first and foremost what the citizens of Sedro-Woolley, rather than a few governing heads, want for their library. Finally, I would like to suggest that, in order to avoid any appearance even of for both teams, as my husband puts it, that while he is running for a county-voted elected office, Mr. Berg should recuse himself from the negotiating team between the City of Sedro-Woolley and the Central Skagit Library District, a county entity. For all our sakes, it is the right and ethical thing to do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mayor.
Dorothy DeFremery, 316 Garden of Eden Road. And before I begin, thanks very much to Councilman or Woman Corngay, because I really appreciate your response to the Orlando situation. That was outstanding.
Thank you.
So I think that having a public forum or open house on the 25th is a great step forwards towards clearing up some of the confusion and miscommunications that have been so rampant regarding the future of our city library. The format of that meeting will have a large impact on whether or not it is successful in clearing up misconceptions. If the council is divided up amongst the attendees to answer questions, the confusions that exists will only continue, because not everyone will hear the same questions or the same answers. Clarity is so important. My suggestion for that meeting is that after whatever facts, sheets, charts, or opportunities to express opinions are shared, that there be a short intermission to digest that information. I would like to then see a question and answer period with all the council, the mayor, our city attorney, and our city librarian available to answer questions, so that we all hear the same thing at the same time. I would like that to be the same format used for public comment, but instead of being restricted, to open it to questions and answers and have it recorded for future reference. I would also like to recommend that the public be able to attend any further negotiations, proposals, or counter-proposals between the City of Sedro-Woolley and the Central Skagit Library. This would also help with transparency. I concur with Mary Anderson's comments regarding the Robert Rules of Order. I won't repeat those, but I was going to suggest that those be revisited during the committee report section of tonight's council meeting, so it can be done according to Robert's Rules of Orders, because what happened last time was not done well, for lack of better. I had always told my students when I was teaching that there is no such thing as a stupid question. For every question or comment that is made, there are always many others with the same concerns who are either not willing or not able to speak up. I hope you will keep in mind as you are listening to those who do. In the past, I've always felt...
That's 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry. I'm almost done.
I got assigned to timekeeping again, so...
Oh, well.
So that's 3 minutes.
That was 3 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Save it for next time.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you.
I am proposing a resolution.
I'm sorry, can you state your name and address, please?
Sorry. Yes, Loretta Saranen, 821 Park Cottage Place.
Thank you.
I am distributed a proposed resolution, and we're going to skip the first four because it's, that yada yada stuff that's in resolution. So, whereas the City of Sedro-Woolley has a public library that is a popular city service and has been serving residents for nearly over 100 years, and whereas the City of Sedro-Woolley Library is located in downtown Sedro-Woolley next to a city park and community center and has the option to expand, and whereas the City of Sedro-Woolley Library has a valuable book collection, equipment, and technology resources, and whereas the City of Sedro-Woolley has a competent and experienced library staff that has a successful history of running a rural town library, and whereas the citizens value the Sedro-Woolley Library and have demonstrated it through their use of the library, voting for funding, and in action, deeds, and words of support, and whereas the City of Sedro-Woolley believes in open and transparent government and exploring all options in negotiations, excuse me, typo there, with the Central Skagit Rural Partial County Library District, I want to propose that the Sedro-Woolley Library offering a library service contract, the City of Sedro-Woolley to contact library services to the Central Rural Skagit Partial County Library. The contract will include compensation from the district for provided services and maintenance and consideration of our current library facilities and service. The City of Sedro-Woolley will explore with the architectural firm a building remodel plan for expanding and updating the library facility along with estimated project cost. The library needs assessment will help guide the planning of the library for the future that will be of service to our city patrons and the district until they can fulfill their goals. I respectfully submit this for consideration. Also, I didn't see anything, action taken on the proposal last week that the time be expanded for more than 3 minutes, and I trust that that has been discussed, and we'll look forward to hearing about the decision made on that. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Loretta.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Helge Anderson, 928 Beachley Road, Sedro-Woolley. I think that this sort of dark comedy or comedy noir actually should come to an end. You guys can end it. As we saw in U.S. Congress today, the ridiculous thing again, the gridlock about expanded gun control that never got anywhere. And this thing is not going anywhere either. And so what I want to say is, because about that gun control, 85% of the American people support expanded gun control. Now, we don't know. Maybe the majority of the Sedro-Woolley people support what I call the library gate issue. Yeah. But anyway, your job is to represent the people of Sedro-Woolley and not the mayor, whatever mayor's intentions are. And the only way for you guys to not be like the U.S. Congress, particularly on the Republican side there, I hope I didn't hurt somebody's feelings, but anyway, is to actually take this to a vote. The people of Sedro-Woolley, because this issue may just be one of them. What's the next issue going to be? That you're going to run in your own interest? Maybe somebody's going to use it as a springboard for greener pastures. I don't know. But anyway, this needs to go to a vote. And you need to consider the people of Sedro-Woolley, what they want on this thing, and not Mr. Wagner's. Thank you very much. And two of your people, I honor you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make public comment tonight? Okay, at this time, I'll close the public comment period, and we'll move on to public hearing. In a moment, we'll open a public hearing to discuss the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as TIP 2017 to 2022. Please limit your testimony on this to the issue at hand. I'll be calling names in the order in which they signed in, and alternating between those who are for and against the issue. This is your opportunity to provide testimony on the record. It's not time to debate, once again. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, as always, and 1 time to the microphone per person, please. And we're going to enforce the 3 minutes again at this time, and your testimony is important to us. Randy, come on up.
We'll start. Usually.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry, Randy, 1 moment. Mark, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you've already so ably introduced, tonight we're having the public hearing for the 2017 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program. As a part of that, I'll also be presenting on the expanded 2017 to 2037 20-year local transportation program. That'll be a part of my discussion tonight. Your action, however, will only, and this is just the first reading on that, but your action, should you choose to take that next week, or at the next council meeting on July 13th, will only be on the 2017 to 2022 TIP. That's the part that requires adoption. So this is an annual process. The city reviews our own local transportation plan and updates that as necessary. That's acted upon by council as we began the process tonight. And after adoption, that is forwarded on to the Skagit Council of Governments for inclusion in the regional TIP, and ultimately ends up in the state TIP and then the federal Transportation Improvement Program. The importance of this, let me move down a slide. This talks about the 2017 TIP in a nutshell. Project inclusion in the TIP is required for most state and all federal funding that we may be eligible for. Public hearing, as we're having tonight, is required. This particular year's TIP and the expanded 2023 to 37 TIP, which I mentioned, are heavily influenced by the 2016 Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 3, Transportation Element, which you adopted a few weeks back. The project list is virtually identical. There are a few minor additions, which I'll go through in a moment, to that plan. I also will point out to you as we go through the project list the primary focus of the TIP over the next few years, and that is Fruitdale Road Arterial Improvements Project, which we currently are in design on, and if funding is available for us, we will build that in 2017. And then the other major project that we have, there are actually two, one of them ran together there, I apologize on that. The Jones-John Liner Road Corridor Project, which actually is a combination of all of the projects that will run from Highway 9 Township along John Liner Road, connect to Jones Road with a new undercrossing at the Burlington Northern Railroad crossing there, and then eventually continue on Jones and eventually go back south by a trail road to Cook Road. So that is a corridor project that's made up of a number of individual projects, which you see on the list there, including an intersection improvement at Highway 9 and McGarrigle, the railroad undercrossing, which I mentioned, into arterial improvements to Jones and John Liner, and then a new section of trail road from Cook to F&S and then on up to Garden of Eden Road. And then the other project, which is tacked on to the end of that one we just discussed, is intersection improvements at the existing signal at SR20, SR9 Township. Those improvements would include adding a right turn lane on the southbound lane and on the westbound lanes of that where they currently don't exist. Those are the major projects you'll see. There's a few others in there that support that and continue it, but that'll be our primary focus at Public Works over the next 6 years at least. Secondary focus, which I've been mentioning over time recently, is including arterial streets for routine maintenance overlays, mainly. The reason I've put these in the TIP, they do not have to be in the TIP, but in order to, again, qualify for state funding, and we have been successful with TIB funding, Transportation Improvement Board funding, for the last several years on that, they do have to be on the TIP, so I've added those in. Okay, so the next two slides, this is the portion of the project list that are on state routes, either State Route 20 or State Route 9, and the projects that are associated with that. The ones to the southwest are basically the extensions of the 10-foot shared use path that we are constructing the first couple of sections of this year. S14A and S14B that you see, not sure that's reaching all the way over there. Oh, there you go. This section from Highway 9 to Hodgen Road are actually going to be constructed this summer. The rest of these are extensions of that out to the city limits, which we have scheduled over the next 20 years. Neither of those projects is in the 6-year TIP, but they are in the expanded version of that. And the other projects are the intersection project I mentioned at SR 20 and SR 9, and also some minor intersection improvements at Central Avenue and at Metcalf Street that are in there. All of these projects basically, and one other one that I'll discuss in a little more detail in a minute. This one is at the intersection of West State Street and Highway 9, and that is also a right turn lane to add some capacity at that intersection. So these projects are on the state route, and they're categorized in that way. The other are arterial projects throughout the city. Again, this map shows the 20-year list. I didn't take the time to bring that down to the 6-year level, but it's just a portion of these on the 6th-year. The primary ones, again, are Fruitdale Road that you see here, and the intersection at SR 20 and SR 9. Those are the primary ones that show up in the 6-year TIP on that. And then the beginning stages of the corridor project, which I mentioned on Jones and John Liner. I have 2 of those projects in the 6-year TIP. They're a few years down the road, but we're going to start looking for funding for those in the next couple of years and hopefully start building those within this TIP period. Changes from the 2016 to 2021 TIP, which you adopted last year at this time. Most of these are overlay projects. As I mentioned, we're focusing on that, and I want to have projects in the queue as we apply for TIB funding on a yearly basis in an organized manner. The one we've identified as the highest priority is State Street between Rita and 4th. A portion of that near Metcalf was overlaid a few years ago when we did 3rd Avenue, but this will pick up the tail ends of that and fix the worst sections of State Street, including the railroad crossing down there that has become quite a little problem for us. Also, I have listed on here a State Street sidewalk project to fill in a missing section of that. Jameson Street Overlay Project 1. Jameson's a pretty long street, a couple of miles long, and so I've broken the overlays for that up into 4 projects for funding purposes, and this would be the first stretch of this, which would basically pick up where we left off, or will be leaving off when we finish the project this year that's constructing the roundabout and rebuilding Jameson to the tennis courts. It'll go from that point basically to 5th Avenue, and then there'll be a second project, the last one on this added project list, that would go from 5th basically to about 10th. About 5 blocks per project, and then there'll be 2 more segments of that which will occur or appear in the 2023 to 2037 list. And the other one is that State Street Intersection Improvement Project that I mentioned a moment ago, which we currently have scheduled for 2022. And I'll just say again that all of these projects are subject to funding. We're getting them in the queue by having them on the tip, but they'll actually be programmed and built as funding becomes available. Completed projects from last year's list. We're anticipating the completion of the Jameson Arterial Project, which is under construction. The 2 Cascade Trail Extension projects, which I already mentioned, from basically Highway 9 to Hodgen Road. Then the Jameson Street Sidewalk Project, which is south of the high school gym. That's a part of the Jameson Arterial Project. And the Ferry Street Overlay Project, which was actually completed today. So in addition to that, we actually have rescheduled the Fruitdale Road Sidewalk Project to be a part of the Fruitdale Arterial Project, so it no longer shows up as a separate project on the tip, and I'm just noting that here. And then we had a project that we've carried forward for several years, the last one on the list, the stormwater conveyance system upgrade, that I've moved that beyond the 6-year window just because we're completing most of the requirements for that upgrade with the project, the trail project. We're upgrading the most capacity issue causing parts of that as a part of the sidewalk project. So this one's not as, it needs to be done, but it can be scheduled downstream, and indeed I would anticipate we would do it in association with those other sidewalk trail projects down the road. So I've scheduled it in the same window as those. So there's a total of 19 projects in last year's TIP. This year it's 17 because we've completed 5, as I show, and then we've put a couple new ones on there. The next slides, and you have these in your packet, of course, are just the detailed project list. The first one is the 2017-22, which we'll actually be acting on, hopefully on the 13th, and you have some numbers there. Just for interest purpose, if you look down at the bottom of the list, it does show the total value of the projects, $22,359,000. Of those, $20,370 are transportation improvement fee eligible. We'll be talking about the TIF in a few minutes. And then the other projects, which we fund in other manner, almost $2 million. The Sedro-Woolley cost for those represents 25%. That's what I've been programming into them. We have been coming out much better than that, but that's a conservative target for local funding, and that's part of what I'll be talking about in a minute with the transportation improvement fees. So the changes from 2022 to 2036 to 2023-37, the expanded project list. We added 3 projects, 2 of which are overlays, as I mentioned. That's a focus for keeping those on the list. And then another section of the John Liner Jones Trail Road program that wasn't on last year's TIP, but now shows up in the 20-year. It's the section on John Liner to upgrade it to a full arterial. We have a shorter-term project that is in the 6-year TIP that would just add a shared use path on the north side of that. That's kind of to get that done now if we can get funding for it, and we did apply for funding, which we talked about a few weeks back under the Safe Routes program. That will be built to accommodate this future arterial project. There won't be anything torn out or lost if we do get that funding earlier, but it will help with the school kids getting down John Liner Road more safely than they do today, which they walk down the middle of the street is how they get there today. Completed and rescheduled projects that were in the 20-year, which are now deleted, actually. These 2 were improvement projects that were identified in the EIS that was done for the Northern States Gateway Center reuse project. We found in studying this further and when we did our comprehensive plan that they should not be necessary, assuming that we do build the Jones-John Liner improvements project to take some traffic off the route. So again, there's 25 projects in last year's expanded TIP, and now there's 29, and mainly due to the addition of the overlay projects, as I mentioned. And here's just a detailed list. That's $34 million in projects with an expected match of about $8.8 million. One other thing just to spend a minute on, part of our TIP, not directly related to what you're acting on, but just for information purposes in our transportation plan, We have several citywide projects. CW1 is the Sidewalk Improvement Program and ADA Transition Plan Program. We've been programming $25,000 per year for that project for a number of years, and using that mostly for match recently for projects that had that kind of impact. And I have in our budgeting been agitating to raise that figure, and in the comp plan we actually showed a 3% inflation on that over 20 years, which would take that to $620,000 over 20 years. The second one is our street overlay and chip seal program. This actually overlaps with the overlay projects that are on the arterial list. This is the local funds that we program every year for chip seals and overlays. We have at times used this as matching funds for those TIB projects when we've got them. When we don't have a TIB project or we've been able to match it otherwise, we've used this strictly for local access street overlays. Again, budgeting that at $71,000 starting in 2017, inflating at 3% per year, $1,735,000 over 20 years. The last one is just our general operations and maintenance, which was budgeted this year at about $729,000, inflating that at 3% per year, which is just normal growth in our expenses. About $18 million in operations over the 20-year window. And again, this is consistent with the 2016 comprehensive plan. I'll be coming to talk to you later this year, probably in the fall after we get some of these projects finished, and I have a little more time, about the overall maintenance and preservation side of the transportation budget. And again, this is just a tabular version of that, and that's my presentation. So if you have any questions about that, there's no action required tonight, but I'd be glad to talk about it, and I know the public will have a few things to say.
And if you think back to the page that shows the total of projects, the $35 million seems like a big number. Just for point of reference, from 2008 to 2016, Mark oversaw the development of just over $25 million worth of arterial street projects in Sedro-Woolley, with a city dollar match component of about $2.2 million, or just under 9%, about 8.7%, 8.6%. So looks like big numbers might seem unattainable, yet at least the history for the past 9-year period or 8-year period has been extremely successful on achieving these large-scale projects.
Thank you, Mark. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Randy, come on up.
It is cool in there.
I have some documentation Eileen will hand out right now.
Randy, can you state your name and address, please?
Yes, Randy Good, President of the Friends of Skagit County, 35482 State Route 20, Sedro-Woolley.
Thank you.
After she hands that out, about a minute from now, I've got to do all this in 3 minutes, I'll discuss these documentation. But first, I just want a little introductory deal here. Our comments on project ID number C29 under the 6-year TIP, and the project is actually under the long-term list, and this dealing with the county right-of-way south of Jameson, which is part of that C29 project. With a clouded title, Skagit County is actually claiming ownership of that parcel, and we're going to show you documentation here tonight how by quitclaim deed the county confiscated that land, and it was an abandoned railroad corridor from Sedro-Woolley out to the Snohomish County line, and without the easement landowner's knowledge. And so if you go to that very first, it's a county attorney telling the commissioners how to steal that railroad easement lands. Right where I have it marked with the second paragraph, it says, "We wish to be sure that you are aware of the fact that one of the reasons why Burlington Northern may be willing to sell at a reduced value, it is that it is likely that the railroad does not have clear title to the right-of-way, which is a selling to the county." We'll then go to the next page, and then down at the bottom, last paragraph on that page, it says, if the board is concerned with adjoining property owners exerting a claim to the trail without the county having established former ownership thereof, an appropriate course of action would be for the county to commence a quiet title action to the 101 acres, which they did. Now, if you go to the next page, it shows another alternative. They could post signs indicating it is county property and proceed to treat it as county property. And they actually bought the sign, but they never put the signs up. So what they did do was the one I previously talked. So you go to the next page, and here's the quitclaim deed that they filed. And actually, it's the very same quitclaim deed that's on this piece of property, the project that we're discussing here right now. And then on the next page is the court case that was called Lundvall versus Skagit County, and the landowners actually won the court case, kicked the county off of their properties, and that was just one of 3 court cases, quiet title actions against the county, forcing the county off their property. So we request, please consider this information in making your decisions. Friends really recommends removing this project until the private property rights of this parcel are addressed. But since this is, I guess, if we can be assured that this is just a wish list, then maybe somehow they need to red tag this project until, as it works through or as it stays there. Some notification needs to be put onto that project that there's really concerns about who is the legal owner of that property. Thank you. That's probably my 3 minutes.
Yeah, you did it in 2 minutes and 58 seconds.
What? Nice job, Randy. Thank you.
Practice that one.
Thank you, Randy.
Practice with the mayor.
Is anyone else wishing to speak on this matter tonight? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. So do we need, this is a first reading, there's no action necessary
Yeah, it's just
tonight?
a first reading, so unless there's any direction from council as to any changes you might like, it will come back to you next time for a second reading and possible action.
Okay, and on to unfinished business. Proposed revisions to Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code 15.04, local amendments to adopted state building code, second reading. John?
Good evening. Just a quick recap on this. Every 3 years, the state adopts revised building codes. The International Building Code, International Residential Code, Mechanical Code, Property Maintenance Code, and several others. The state automatically adopts it, and every jurisdiction needs to start following those rules on July 1st of 2016. This is sort of a formality, adopting those codes ahead of time and stating that we acknowledge it, and just avoid all any legal ramifications by not adopting something that the state says that we're supposed to adopt. There's not really any great shakes to this one. We're not requesting any special changes to it besides what the state tells us we should be adopting, and we have some of our own different amendments to it that we've passed in previous years, and I'm not recommending that we change any of those. So basically everything stays the same except for the modifications to the codes itself that the state has reviewed and more or less requiring us to adopt.
Okay, thank you, John. Is there any discussion by the council?
John has it pretty straightforward.
No? Okay.
John has it pretty straightforward.
Do we have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code 1504 regarding adoption of 2015 state building codes with local amendments?
What's the ordinance number?
Ordinance number will be 1851-16.
There has been a motion for that?
No, she's requesting a motion.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to make the motion to adopt ordinance
1851-16 to revise Chapter 1504 to reflect state adoption of the 2015 building codes and enact certain local amendments.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion made by Julia to adopt ordinance 1851-16, amending Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code 1504 regarding adoption of 2015 state building codes with local amendments, and second by Council Member Lemley. All in favor? Aye. And opposed? Okay, it carries 6-0.
Yeah.
And next on the agenda, we have new business, 2016 Transportation Impact Fee Update, first reading.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a follow-up on the comp plan update, which was adopted some weeks ago. As you know, we have a transportation impact fee system that provides dollars for building projects such as we just talked about. We're showing on the 6-year tip. They provide either match funds or actual dollars to build projects that are identified as development-driven projects, or mainly that will cause traffic impacts by developing additional trips, vehicle trips on our highway system. So we engaged Transportation Solutions Incorporated, the same company that did the transportation analysis work for northern states for the Port City and County Partnership relating to the Northern States Center project to do this. They also did the work for our comprehensive plan, so they're very familiar with our program. And then I had them look carefully at our 2005 version and make some suggestions on how we could simplify that particular way of doing business with a new way. And so that's what we're presenting to you tonight. The 2013 TIF update was adopted back then and changed the rates significantly from what they had been for quite a number of years since adoption in 2005. They were lowered by an average of around 70%, a little less than that, from the original rates. This particular update we're doing now will bump them up a bit, which was a needed addition on this, and I'll go through the logic on that shortly. The analysis work that Transportation Solutions did is in conformity with the comp plan transportation element and the analysis that was done for that. And that the 20-year projections that are included in that also include the traffic generation that is expected from what's now being called the SWIFT Center at Northern States. The projects added to the transportation impact fee list are the same ones that we discussed on the 2017 to 22 TIP, and also in this, the transportation impact fee list is for the entire 20-year period to 2037. As we discussed when we adopted the 2013 TIP, we have sought to reduce the previous 15 zones that were in the 2005 plan for applying impact fees in a spread out manner to just 2 zones. One of them will be the Central Business District, and then everything else in the city would have a second rate. And I already talked about TSI. So what does it do? Basically, the numbers that you see here, the impact fee rates that are proposed for the Central Business District are $1,341 per trip generated. That's basically how that's figured. You do an analysis. We actually have a lookup table. In commercial buildings and operations, it's based on square footage and type of use. And it uses a nationally recognized trip generation system by the International Transportation Engineers Association to come up with that. It's a well-recognized source for that kind of thing. And we also have for trips generated for single-family residences, which are the basis for all of this. Yes, Rick.
A quick Reader's Digest on how they determine that by the number of cars that go by, the length of the road, the depth of the road, things like that, and determine how the longevity of what that's going to be by the traffic use.
Yeah, it's basically
cost over the period of that time and things. So
right, and you put your finger on the way they do that.
Tabulated all these things, and it's going to cost this much.
Right. The ITE manual wouldn't get into the cost estimate or element of it. That's what this system that we're talking about tonight does. It applies dollars to those trips generated. What the ITE manual does is gives us a scientific way of applying a trip generation to various sources. And our impact fee system gives a developer the right to hire their own transportation engineer and come up with their own trip generation. They still have to use our base fee, which is based on a single-family residence for that. And that's basically the numbers that you're seeing here. The 1,031 would be a single trip. That's the estimated impact per single trip for development. But their system gives us the basis for doing that. A developer can hire their own engineer to do that if they challenge what's in the ITE manual, or they have better data. This was done some years ago when the Skagit Farmers facility was built. We chose from the manual a trip generation based on a small farm-type supply store, and we used that. They thought it was a bit high, so they had actually data from all the stores they have because they're a chain. They brought that in. It looked fine, so we used their lower rate. It also, the transportation impact fee project list, if a development is on a route that is identified for a project improvement and they construct the improvements, they're actually eligible for a credit up to the amount of the improvements that they put in. It depends. If the improvements are more than the amount of the impact fees, their credit would only be up to the amount of the impact fees. They'd still have to build it anyway beyond that. But there is a vehicle for them to be credited for work that they're doing that meets our goals of completing these projects. And Skagit Farmers is, again, a good example of that. They built the sidewalks in front, and they continued the center turn lane down to the length of their property. The improvements they did were more than the amount of impact fees they would have been charged, and they paid nothing for that. Okay, so the other side from the CBD is the non-CBD. That's the middle column. And the trips generated, growth trips are shown actually on the fourth line there. They're estimating about 3,427 additional trips for the analysis purposes. And then the impact fee that we came up with was $2,407 for that. So that would be for a single trip generated for a residence, or if it was multifamily, there's a way of calculating that with things like Rick mentioned, bypass factors and all the rest of that come into play. I won't bore you with the arcana. I can't even say I totally understand it myself. I can follow it, but I hire experts to do this stuff that's defensible, standard of the industry thing. For the citywide, which is everybody outside of the central business district, the estimated average is the citywide would be average of everything, CBD and non-CBD. So the average citywide is $2,387, about $2,400. It's pretty close to the amount if you were not in the CBD that you would be looking as your base rate. So how does that compare with 2013? That's the next couple of lines. The 2013 rates, again, which were lowered significantly from 2005, were $1,081 for the central business district. I didn't have a comparable non-CBD because we had 14 other zones, so I used the citywide average for comparison purposes since they're relatively close. It was $1,412 before, now it's $2,387, and you can see the percentage increases there. They look fairly high. Dollar-wise, they're not that high, though, and there's still a significant reduction from 2005, which you can see from the next line there. In 2005, Central Business District was $2,386. We're still 44% under that. The outside of the Central Business District was $3,897. We're still 39% below that. So this is just a map showing the projects that are impact fee eligible. In your packets, both on the tip and also in the project list that's attached to your packet, you can see the actual names of these projects. They are essentially the same projects of major significance that you saw in the tip. And so this is a picture, and this is in your packet, of the actual projects that are in the 6-year and in the 20-year window there. The dates are a little different in this just because this is based on the projects identified in the comprehensive plan, which went from 2016 to 2036. It has actually been adjusted to add the 1 or 2 projects that I talked about in the tip. So that's it for my presentation. Again, this is a first reading tonight. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have on this transportation impact fee update.
Thank you, Mark. Does council have any questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
More.
Okay, we'll move on to committee reports.
Before you do that, I don't know if the council wanted to talk at all about the issues that Randy Good raised, but I would certainly be prepared to discuss that with you if you want to go into that in more detail.
Yeah.
It's up to you. So I've had the benefit of talking to Randy more than once. And I think it's important to kind of go back on the timeline on here and also to differentiate between the Centennial Trail and the Cascade Trail. So a couple of things happened, but I charted out a timeline that I think helps me, and I guess I would invite Randy to jump in if you think I'm missing something on it. But essentially at some point in the 1800s, I don't know the time, I haven't looked it up, but Burlington Northern acquired an easement on individual property owners' land for the operation of railroad, and they used federal authority to do that. Their easement was limited to their use as a railroad. So the issue there is when you cease operations as a railroad, just like for us, if we were to cease use of a platted street, that land goes to the adjoining property owners. So in Sedro-Woolley, you own to the center of the street in front of your house in most cases, and if the city vacates it, it's yours in most cases. In this case, the standard rule would be when the railroad abandoned, the land would go to the adjoining property owners. Sometime in the 80s, I presume the railroad did in fact abandon the land. And at that same time, whenever that moment of abandonment occurred, and that's part of what creates vagueness in this process, is what is abandonment exactly. But at that moment, the adjoining landowners who always owned their land now had all of the bundles of sticks. They owned it without their subservience of the railroad easement. Most of them didn't know that, and that's really probably what is most offensive, I suspect, is the fact that there's a smoking gun memo that essentially says, hey, here's a way to do this without tipping off the adjoining landowners that you're going to do it. So at that moment of abandonment, they owned it, that is the property owners. In 1993, then, Burlington Northern quit-claimed the property to the county. I suspect for those landowners who challenged it and won, the court essentially found that that quitclaim was as meaningful as if I quitclaimed Chuck's house to Brenda, which I could do and the county would record it, and it would be meaningless. Slightly different here in that Burlington Northern, in fact, did have an easement, did have property, and in fact purported to maintain underlying property rights to minerals and so on. But I suspect if you were to read the full court file, you would find that the court said that deed didn't mean anything. We move on. However, most property owners didn't do anything. And therefore, in the year 2000, the county would be able to argue that it acquired the land through adverse possession through color of title, which is a 7-year deal. So that is, if you have some argument that you own it, usually for private people, it's that you have some indications of ownership, such as a deed, and you pay taxes, and 7 years goes by, and your use is open, public, notorious, and it's adverse to the underlying property owner, then in fact it becomes yours. So the classic case there is the owner before you moves a fence 2 feet onto your neighbor's yard, sells you the house, you buy it, you don't even know the fence is in the wrong place, you don't have a survey, most people don't. After 7 years, that 2 feet is now yours and not your neighbor's. Now, if the color of title argument were to fail, then in the year 2003, the county would acquire this land through straight-up adverse possession. So this is the scenario where the person goes up in the woods, cuts down some of somebody's trees, builds a cabin, and a decade goes by. At the end of that 10th year, they now own, they took it, they stole it, however you want to phrase it. The law will favor them and will quiet title in their favor to that. So in my sense of the timeline, and it really isn't up to the city, in terms of our tip, but in my sense of the timeline, property owners who jumped into this anytime probably between 1993 and 2000 and maybe 2003 should have had the same outcome as the property owners represented by Mr. Peach in the case in 1996. That is, they would have effectively retaken their land. But for whatever reason, they didn't, and time went by. And ultimately what happened here is Burlington Northern managed to get paid a fee to transfer a significant liability to Skagit County in the form of a multi-million-dollar demolition of a railroad bridge, environmental contamination, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know for sure, but I have a strong suspicion that the county government would very much like to go back to 1993 and not do this, at least with the stretch from Sedro-Woolley to Clear Lake that includes the bridge and contaminated land. So that's a long way of saying I don't dispute any of Randy's facts, and I can see why anybody who reads the memo would be offended. But so much time has gone by, it's also difficult for me to understand how an underlying property owner after the year 2003 would have a continuing claim, at least in court. Certainly morally that's there, but in terms of a legal claim, the law favors a resolution of these issues, and so much time has gone by, it seems to me that that's probably resolved. With regard to our tip, however, Mark could show you a number of projects where we've drawn red lines right through private property, and I'm not sure I would be able to say that everyone we've drawn a line through even knows the line is there. And the point isn't that that's exactly where the road's going to be built. The point is that we, as the city, have identified a need for a connection in roughly a particular area. And as we dive into these projects, one of our requirements, of course, is to acquire the property rights to build in those areas. And whether it's on county land, state land, as we had to do with the roundabouts, or private land, we have to go through the process of obtaining the right to access and use the land. So the fact that it's on the tip doesn't change any underlying property ownership, but it seemed to me it was important to kind of walk through at least how I see the timeline. And lastly, before I let Randy jump back in and correct anything that I said that he disagrees with, the Cascade Trail is different in that this was a movement that was happening across the county, that is the conversion of abandoned railways to trails. And this outcome that you saw in the Peach case here, Lundvall case represented by Mr. Peach, I think was pretty typical. So the United States Congress stepped in and said, well, you know what? We want more trails, so we're going to say that we're going to develop a federal program that will allow railroads to take their land, their easement, their rights, and bank them, and therefore not have them be abandoned. And under this model, the Cascade Trail, for example, is still a railroad. So that's how that happened, that all of a sudden the Centennial Trail was treated one way, the Cascade Trail is different, is the federal law intervened, Congress intervened and changed the rules on the landowners up there. So,
well, actually, the courts have ruled that it was a takings, and so, the federal courts are paying for that compensation. And so you're right on the intent of the rail banking is that to preserve these corridors for future rail reactivation, which can happen at any time and will happen at any time. Concerning the Snohomish or Sedro-Woolley to Snohomish, there's been the Lake McMurray, a group of landowners out there filed a quiet title and kicked the county off their property.
What year was that?
Can't remember. And so did Clear Lake. Clear Lake did the same. But the point, I guess, is that Aaron mentioned about your neighbor. Well, these others, there were 17 that were involved in the lawsuit that we knew about. And okay, so those 17 knew about it, but the rest of them didn't know. And so it's like you own your farm or your house, and that neighbor is using your property, and you don't know about it, and then all of a sudden, this 10 years is up, and tough luck, Well, and I really, personally, I dairy farm for 35 years. And so, and other residents here in the county, if we knew that the city and the county has a line drawn through my property, I'd be pretty upset about it. So, I mean, and that's maybe one of the reasons that more people need to know about this TIP meeting, and except for just a public notice, legal notice in the paper, it doesn't say anything. But still, Mark did this year for the first year, put it on the internet, the information up here, but it's never been any other year. So maybe that would be a good reason to have the public be aware of what's really going on here with these transportation projects. Because if your citizens knew that there was a line drawn through their property, I think they'd be pretty damn upset.
Well, but again,
it doesn't matter, Aaron, if you have a project proposed, at least let them know about it.
Yeah, right.
They don't know about it. It's the same way with these landowners out here on the corridor. The very corridor we're talking, they didn't know that.
Yeah, I guess, but I want to draw a distinction there out of fairness, and that
distinction from what?
Well, the distinction from what happened in 1993 and our line on the map.
So you're saying it's illegal to steal their land then?
Well, what I'm saying is in 93, the county clearly developed a path to be sneaky, all right? I mean, it's
our goal here tonight, Aaron, was to inform the council of what went on that. And so, it's a clouded title. It doesn't matter who's going to clear the title. So they got to do something to have a clear title. No one has.
Yeah, well.
So you don't have a clear title to that property, Aaron. The county doesn't.
We don't have anything to do with the ownership.
Right, I know, but the county does not have a clear title. And they do not have a clear title to about 5 or 6 other parcels from Sedro-Woolley out to by Big Lake there. So there's more to it than what you said. And so the fact that the people, your neighbor doesn't know that you're losing your land? Come on.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what else I have to add other than I do want to make clear, at least in my mind, that the 1993 action, the reason this is so emotional and it's the memo. I mean, the county articulated a legal strategy to do this without being upfront, right? I mean, they've got 3 pathways for taking the land. They clearly articulate in their memo that this would be the least expensive method, and they even talk about how for those people who figure it out, we'll have to pay them. So that's just not how you expect your government to act. Quite different, in my opinion, from the idea that we've developed a long-term project list, and none of this affects somebody's property rights in the absence of their knowledge. When it comes time to build a project, we can't do it without going through the process of acquiring property rights with people. Nothing about this takes away their role or their rights or their responsibility in that process. Fundamentally different from the strategy, the legal strategy that was outlined in this memo to the county in 1993.
Just so I'm clear, so what you're saying is if the Centennial Trail project is something that is going to go through. We will negotiate with the property owners. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, one, I don't anticipate the city of Sedro-Woolley would build the Centennial Trail, right? That would be a regional project or a county project. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that the city decided to get involved in building the trail, we would have to acquire the property rights. So I don't think that and I'm not the expert on this, but my timeline suggests to me that the underlying property owners' rights are now gone by their inaction over the course of these decades that have gone by. Okay. So, well, I think they clearly had a cause of action from 1993 to maybe 2003. This is 2016. I don't know when this project could happen. Maybe it's 2023. You know, there just isn't a process to leave land in limbo forever. I mean, that's where that 10 years comes in. That's a very important number. That's one of the reasons why some of these large landowners have people who literally cruise their properties, timberlands, every year. They cruise them every year to make sure nobody's doing, slipping a fence in or whatever. So we would have to acquire the rights to the property just like we do on any other project, and I don't know what that would look like at this point.
So then for Mr. Good, an option for him then might be that he could notify those property owners that if they want to pursue it, although it may not be legal anymore, because there's nothing we can do about it, correct?
Right. We don't own it.
There's nothing we can do.
We're not claiming we own it.
Yeah.
We don't really have any dog in the hunt in terms of who owns what on that land at this point in time.
Yep, okay.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on this? No? Okay, moving along to committee reports. Chief Tucker?
Nothing I have is this complicated as property rights or anything like that. One of my sergeants is down with a fractured arm.
Oh, no.
I don't know if I told anybody this before. We're going to ban him from riding bicycles because this is, I think, downtime number 3 for Dan McElwraith crashing his bike. I think he was going off a jump up on Whistler in Vancouver, but we may ban him from Canada as well. Sergeant Dave Pierce is back from his Coast Guard deployment, and we've actually had eyes on him. We've seen him. We're getting the date of early August, 1st of August. He'll be back to work for us. He's got to demobilize with the Coast Guard and then have a little bit of leave time with his wife. I think she's demanding it. So he'll be back in August. We had a Rotary dedication this last Saturday. Dean and I got to break in the Janicki's big monster 8-burner barbecue grill and cook about 100 hot dogs and feed everybody in the rain. It was pretty successful for as miserable as the weather was. And some of you may have seen, we're starting to hear the popping and banging of fireworks, and we're just putting the word out. Historically, it's been a little bit of a battle. Prior Mayor Anderson said it got worse and worse and worse, and to the point of being something akin to Armageddon on every 4th of July. My take was it was pretty much the same every year. There's a bunch of idiots out there trying to blow themselves up. We're going to hit them hard before and after 4th of July, and unless they're doing something terribly dangerous, we try to let bygones be bygones on the 4th of July, unless things are getting kind of, we start getting complaints and dangerous. Bottle rocket fired into Rick's yard is not going to be safe no matter what happens or where it goes. All those trees look like they go up like a torch. We're looking at that as more of a safety issue, taking enforcement action. We hate to be the mean guy on the Independence Day and writing tickets, but we did write a few tickets last year. We're going to write a few this year as well. Aaron, are you going to talk about Luigi and the replacement? Or I can mention something on that. Luigi Galino is going on a leave of absence from our offender work program, and we had a couple ideas for his replacement until he gets back, and Aaron brokered a deal with Melissa Dewar to come back and become our offender work program supervisor. So she'll be in here managing some of the people that she probably chased and dealt with over the years until we find out if Luigi wants to come back, and then we'll have to determine in the next 2 or 3 months if that's going to be a permanent replacement and take applications and all that. But you'll see Melissa working around town, ordering people around again. And finally, Detective Paul Eaton had a kind of a neat plan, and he and I are going to meet with Harold and some of the old retired police guys here. Remember breakfast tomorrow, Harold. And meet with some of them, and we're going to go clean up the Carl Strom grave site out at the cemetery. He was an officer that was killed, a night watchman officer for Sedro-Woolley, was killed in 1933, and there's a little park bench out there and a plaque dedicated to him for Medal of Honor. The police department's taken on that, and we're going to go look at some of the other grave sites of former officers and maybe some military folks that are out at our cemetery, and do a little bit of sprucing up, cleaning up, spraying things down, scrubbing off stones. I think we're going to get the bench repainted and all that, and maybe something in the paper about it. We ended up talking to a reporter from the Herald, and they were interested in doing a story as well. So I think we're going to do our cleanup on July 2nd. So you may see some of us out there in police t-shirts and scrubbing away on some tombstones to pay our respects to some of the previous officers.
Nice.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief Tucker. Chief Klinger?
We'll be heading out Monday, or I should say I'll be heading out Monday, heading back to South Dakota. We're going to do the final inspection, UL testing on the engine the 29th. It should be working its way back towards Sedro-Woolley. Expected delivery is July 1st, the day of the deadline. So they're saying they're going to get it here before the deadline, but we'll wait and see. One flat tire and we could be in the cash. But, but hopefully it'll get here on time. Then it goes to go in and get striped, so it won't be looking fancy when it arrives because it won't have any striping done. We've elected to have the striping done locally here so we can keep that in town, and plus these guys do a much better job in town than any of these manufacturers do back east. And once that gets in, we'll start the training on it, and we should have it in service the 1st of August. So the guys are all getting excited for the new engine to get here. And the 4th of July, Chief Tucker was saying, is coming up. We're set, and just for the new council, the way we operate that, we basically surround the town with vehicles. We have one vehicle that we put in the parade, and then the rest of the department, the entire department works that day. Nobody gets it off, and we cover everything around the outside, and everybody's designated which area they're supposed to protect for the city. And because as you all know, if there's a call someplace, you're not getting crossed Ferry Street or down State Street or any of these others. So rest assured, if someone asks, the city's well covered, and we got it handled. So that's it.
Thank you, Chief Klinger. John?
Thank you. The ongoing urban growth area update. As you know, we adopted the comp plan and are presuming adoption by the county of our urban growth area expansion request. On Monday night, the commissioners had another public hearing of their own after the Planning Commission had made their recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. The board wanted to have some additional public hearings, so I attended that meeting to make sure that there wasn't anybody that wanted to challenge us or say anything that may not be true. So fortunately, it went really well, and mostly people were there to talk about two specific issues that had absolutely nothing to do with map amendments or Sedro-Woolley. So it was time well spent listening to neighbors argue about building heights on Guaymas Island. So yes, a pleasant evening of non-activity relating to ours. So hopefully that's proceeding well through the Board of County Commissioners process. The Planning Commission then last night had a meeting on planned residential development regulations, updates to the existing code. That meeting went extremely well because it didn't happen. We're down a Planning Commission member right now, and next month, at the next meeting, we'll be bringing the Planning Commissioner request for council approval. And then we had a sick commissioner, and then an injured commissioner, and then a missing, like somebody else was vacant, not available. So there was no quorum, and we did not have our Planning Commission meeting. But if you'd like, I have the PowerPoint presentation that I was going to show them. Only, 45 minutes or so. We're running a little short tonight, if you want. No? Okay. And things have been really picking up in the building office. We're just lots of requests for small to large projects. Spending a lot of time speaking with people who are interested in developing in Sedro-Woolley, and so I apologize if you're starting to hear that we might be a little bit behind on certain requests or getting back to people about requests. It's getting to be a lot. And happy to try to accommodate everybody. That's good news to be able to try to help people navigate the development opportunities in Sedro-Woolley. So it's going well down there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mark?
Well, as I mentioned, the Jameson project's in full construction, and in fact, the traffic revision to start using the shoe fly around to the east side of the roundabout location should go into effect in the next few days. I don't have an exact date yet. I'll put that on our website and get another press release out once I do get that confirmed. But they're out there this evening putting the Jersey barriers up that are needed to protect the sections that are right next to the deep ditches on the north and the south end of that. So that's moving along pretty well. Even though we had some difficulty getting our traffic control plans approved, we do have that in place now for the stage that they're going to be putting in place this week, and that's about a month's worth of work. That will see the curbs poured and most of the pavement put down on the west side and connecting into Rhodes Road and the walks on that side and all the rest of that. And then they'll flip it over and do the other side and connect into the part that goes across the plant. And they'll be building Jameson Street during this next month as well, most of that, to connect out to the tennis courts. So as you probably have noticed if you've been around town, Ferry Street, they got the striping down today, so they're pretty much done with that project. Might be a little cleanup, but pretty close to being finished with that. David's working hard in between trying to finish the Ferry Street project, getting his plans ready for the Cascade Trail thing. We have to get that off to Federal Highways for their approval, which is about a 3-week process, and then we'll put that out to ad and hopefully get that out to construction here yet this year. Fruitdale Road, I expect to get the 70% plans to review on July the 11th, so that's coming up. And again, we hope to be 100% on that by August the 19th when we'll submit a TIB application for that. And I'll be bringing that to you at some point in the next few weeks for your approval to submit the grant application for that. We also have advertised for a replacement for the Riverfront Park caretaker residence. So that's out now, closes a couple of weeks from now. And the idea is to put a new residence in there to replace the one that's literally falling apart down there now. And probably keep the Clarks happy for quite a little while after that's done. And we kicked off this week our Phase B work on the wastewater treatment plant, the capacity analysis, which we've been talking about for some time. consultant is getting his team together and going on that, and we'll have some product on that. Again, that'll be finished before the end of the year as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Aaron.
So I wanted to show you on our website, if I can get it to work here, our Welcome to the City videos came online. Well, it's telling me it doesn't like it, so might not work.
That's where it is.
Here we go. I posted on Facebook today, and we're getting a lot of positives. So let's see if we can get the volume.
I'm Keith Wagoner, the mayor of the one and only Sedro-Woolley, Washington, and I'd like to welcome you to our city. As a naval officer with 23 years of service, my wife and I have lived across the country and around the globe, but we chose Sedro-Woolley. For us, it was about the schools and the hometown charm, or in Sedro-Woolley's case, I think the hometown spirit, because our community is actively involved. We get things done through community cooperation, and we have thrived and grown on doing things the Sedro-Woolley way. Our city council is embracing growth, and we've prepared for it, with over $40 million in improvements to our arterial streets, a reinvigorated police and fire department, and plenty of buildable lands out of the floodplain. We're ready for your new home or business. Economic enthusiasm generated by the recent annexation of the former Northern State property is driving everything from increased housing sales to business licenses. Newly lowered impact and sewer connection fees reduce barriers to builders and developers. But Sedro-Woolley is also about quality of life for families. We've actively improved our parks and athletic facilities to include the finest skate park and Little League field in the region. Our award-winning schools are the first in the county to be part of the Washington State STEM network. STEM will create a pathway from student to career by connecting schools to academic, technological, and industrial resources. Whether you're a visitor enjoying one of our many summer events like Logger Rodeo, Blast from the Past, or Founders Day, or a sightseer enjoying the beauty of Skagit County, or a future resident or business owner, Sedro-Woolley welcomes you.
So there are 4 of those that are specifically written about the themes welcoming, education, economic development, quality of life. And so these will now live on our website for 3 years as per our agreement with CGI. Our website, our new website, will go live probably early this fall. It's a pretty major task. Totally new look, feel, interaction with the public. So you'll see that. And I don't know, for those who haven't visited our website recently, the City Scene link is on there. We'll have a fresh magazine out in approximately a month. And then the newest tab is the Express Bill Pay button right there on the front, which allows people to manage their utility accounts really entirely online. So you can auto pay through credit cards or through checks or whatever through the Express Pay feature. So a lot of good things going on there. Surprisingly busy for this time of year. It seems like there's just a lot of action at City Hall right now on all fronts. We're continuing to work on a number of countywide issues, including the ambulance services, both at Central Valley and the bigger picture of what it will be in the future. Continuing to work through the process on the jail. Just a lot of major projects and partnerships that are really starting to bear a significant fruit. The Swift Center project, a lot of positive going on there. Adams and Associates was selected here about a week and a half ago to run the new Job Corps Center. I don't know that company yet. I think they have about a dozen Job Corps centers nationwide. So they've taken over and are moving fairly quickly to retool and reopen Job Corps. So, that's in the works.
Aaron, quick question. I must have missed something. When did it become Swift Center?
The Sedro-Woolley Innovation for Tomorrow, that's something that the, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we'd talked about it. Maybe it's been a while, or maybe I'm just thinking we've talked about other places. Has something that the partnership group has been thinking about what to call it. You know, it went from Northern State Hospital to the former Northern State Hospital to the North Cascades Gateway Center to the Center for Innovation and Technology. But it was actually, I guess it was Congressman Larson who threw out the acronym SWIFT Center, which paid homage to both Sedro-Woolley, which was something the mayor really wanted, and also kind of tied into the Volk Swift,
right.
You know, the bird that nests up there.
Oh, yeah, that's appropriate.
It seemed like a rather clever acronym, and the partner groups all liked it. So excellent question, though. If the city council doesn't like it, now it's time.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
So, Sedro-Woolley Innovation for Tomorrow. We haven't convinced the state of this yet, mind you. So we're calling it the Swift Center, and we're optimistic that their sign will say that. But the port likes it, and the Port Commission felt comfortable with it. So that's positive.
Good. Yeah, sounds good.
I guess the last thing I wanted to mention is on item 11, the special meeting on the library. That is outside of the meetings that are set forth in the resolution that was adopted at the last meeting. So I think most of the library folks left already, but that is not one of those 4 meetings. It's an entirely different meeting intended to fulfill the purpose that the council expressed that it wanted of kind of the free-flowing forum to hear from the public. And there is no question that with regard to the 4 meetings, I know we talked about this last time, the council has the ability to affect the outcome of whatever happens in the process at each of those meetings based upon public comment. So I know we heard tonight that somehow the process wouldn't allow for the council to do anything. Yeah. That's just a fundamental misunderstanding about how a city council works. So the 4 meetings are intended to absolutely maximize public opportunity to comment, which of course gives you all the ability then to give direction about what you want between each meeting in terms of revisions. And there are presently no meetings scheduled between the city negotiating team and the district negotiating team. We're continuing to work with SHKS architects on kind of the process of doing the needs assessment and understanding what the community might want in the future library. But we don't have currently scheduled another negotiating team meeting.
Is that on our Facebook? Has that been placed on the Facebook that that's what these meetings are going to be about?
What
you just shared. You said you didn't have a chance to share it with the...
Well, it was in the council memo at the last meeting, I thought, and I thought I'd discuss that at the last meeting.
But I'm just asking, is it on Facebook so that the public knows this is what it's about? This is why we're going to be having the meetings.
For the 4 meetings in particular? No,
right.
But I can put it on there if you'd like.
One meeting, right?
There'll be 4 in all. This is the first one coming up on the 25th.
Well, no,
First of 5.
This is separate from those 4 meetings. So this meeting is so those 4 meetings don't happen until there's something to talk about.
Right.
Right.
This one is happening before there's something to talk. Right. So there would be 5 meetings, including the July 25th meeting.
But do they know that that's what the July 25th meeting is about, is what I'm asking? Is that on Facebook, is what I'm asking?
Well, what's on Facebook is just a special meeting notice, so I could probably provide maybe some more robust context for it. We've also hired a facilitator to help run that meeting from Burke Consulting, so we'll have somebody here to help work with the community on the meeting.
I would just like, so that it's clear, so that there isn't misnomers about...
What the purpose is?
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe so it's not confused with
the 4 meetings? Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, I'd be happy to put something out there that clearly is outside of the 4 meetings and for the purpose of listening to the community. So all I have, we're just getting ready for 4th of July throughout the city, so lots of preparations for the big event. Oh, I guess the last thing I mentioned, I know all of the council has it, but the city council does have some adopted rules of procedure from 1994, which we do not follow, and I point out, for example, it limits speakers to 6 at any microphone time, 3 for and against.
Right.
So there's something right there that, we don't strictly follow those. The meetings are yours. State law does not mandate that you use Robert's rule or that you have a particular procedure. It's your meeting, you own it, you get to run it the way you want to run it. So we had a conversation, I guess back in January, about doing some updates to the rules of procedure to kind of address some of those inconsistencies, and that's something we'll get kicked off working with the committee on. We looked at a number of examples, including my recollection of Spokane Valley's 40 or 50 or 80 page model versus others. And
I know Jermaine and I volunteered to work with you regarding that. So
I remembered there was a group. We'll get the ball rolling on that. So.
Do we want to discuss the length of public comment time at all?
Well, and now I'm glad you brought that up. So I don't do anything based upon the public comment. Public comment is to you, and then if the city council wants a change made, then that's something that you would raise, and if it requires a document drafted, you would ask me to do that, and I'd bring it back to you. So it's really in your court. If you want to have more time, that's up to you.
Discussion? Anybody?
Give them more time.
Yeah. How much time?
I don't know, 5 minutes.
5 minutes would be great.
Goodness.
We're out of here by 8:30 most of the time. People have things to say. We're here to listen.
Okay. And then if we do that, then shouldn't we limit the amount of speakers? Because
we can't.
Because I know, but I'm just saying, it seems like there could be an instance where we could be here pretty much all night.
That's our job.
Go to 9:30. That's okay.
So this is the sort of thing, if we're going to revise the rules of procedure, though, and maybe this would be great to give direction to your committee on that, and then we would bring that back as part of the revised rules of procedure.
How long will that take, though?
I don't know. It won't be ready by the next meeting.
I'm actually thinking that 3 minutes is a lot of time, especially because they come every week and we're hearing the same stuff. But sometimes, of course, that's not going to happen that you're hearing the same stuff.
Well, it's not going to carry on forever that we're going to hear about this. There'll be different topics in the future that won't necessarily have the same people come up week after week.
Don't speak that long anyway.
We can't adjust the length of time according to the topic, really.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I just think that 3 minutes is plenty of time, no matter. When I usually participate in meetings that have Robert's rules, they only usually give you a minute.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Which basically enables you to state your name.
So then you can choose what your priorities are when you know how much time you have, and that's your choice what you say. But I mean, you got a lot done in 3 minutes.
Yeah. 2 minutes and 58 seconds.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, Judith?
Absolutely nothing.
All right, Jermaine?
No, have a safe Fourth.
Did somebody make a motion?
I just want to make a comment about Saturday, the dedication that happened, Tesrick Field. It was really lovely. It was raining, but it was actually very lovely. I don't know how many people are aware of it, but the flag that's flying there flew over the White House. I believe it was on May 24th. So there was a lot of emotion put into that dedication. So if you have a chance, walk over there, take a look at it. There's a difference between driving by it and actually walking through it on the field and checking it out.
Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, I did.
Any comment?
I'd like to ask Mr. Berg if he's traveled around the city, if you take a cruise by I guess it's the front of the senior center. It's really overgrown. It's really out of hand, and
You mean on the State Street side?
Yes.
So that area, Ellen likes to maintain. I'm going to go visit her and see, but it used to be she didn't like us coming in and whacking it down because she maintained that more as a garden area.
I talked to Ellen about it, and she can't keep up with it. It's just out of hand, and in the middle of the rose bushes is a big maple tree growing up, and it just looks awful. So maybe you could talk to Louis, and he could have some of his people go in and cut some of that. It's growing out over the sidewalk and everything. So you'll have to look at it and
I'll go visit Ellen and see what
use your own good judgment what to do about it.
I'm her next door neighbor, and she does the same thing at home too. It goes crazy, and the blackberries are growing up, so that's normal.
That's all I have.
Okay, Rick?
I have no idea.
4th of July coming up. Come down, support Steel Claw Wrestling with fries and burgers. The Beta organization. Nice greasy gut bomb Beta burger. Good stuff. On Saturday, July 2nd, the Eagles Club is having a afternoon, early evening car show and a membership drive. It's going to be open to the public to come in and review the facilities and that. And
good for them.
You don't have to sign in or sign out. And the weather looks like it's going to be great that entire weekend, so town will be bustling, we hope. So
I'm sure.
Come take in festivities.
Thank you.
One last comment. Just a congratulations to you, Aaron. I see here that you received the 2016 AWC Employee Benefit Trust, Will City. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, the credit really goes to Joanne Lazaron in our planning department. She took the role of coordinating that, and it saves us 2% on our premium, so it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you for noticing that. It's a lot of work for the committee, but really Joanne is the laboring oar, and this is her last year doing it. She's given me early notice, so I'm looking for volunteers.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All right, we have a motion to adjourn in second. This meeting is adjourned.